So I've just finished watching last night's boxing action up in Scotland, and I wanted to record some thoughts mainly on the Taylor Warren Joubert fight, and may also discuss a bit of Webb, the heavyweight prospect, later on in this video if we get time. Let's start with Taylor, who's a guy that we've been a fan of on this channel and on the podcast for some time now. Let's start by saying Taylor's a really interesting fighter to watch. He appears to me to be a very tall, rangy guy for his weight class, and typically when you see fighters who are so tall and rangy, they tend to stick to their boxing. They tend to be guys who jab and move. They tend to be guys who try and keep distance. Think Tyrone Nurse. Think Bradley Skeet. Think that kind of fighter. Often, and it's not the case in every example, but often these guys are not the biggest punchers out there because their weight is so distributed amongst a large frame. They don't have the condensed power of a guy who has the same weight but in a much smaller physique, if you like. So typically what you get when you have very tall, rangy fighters in a division is guys who are technicians, guys who move a lot, guys who jab a lot, guys who, kind of stick to that traditional ABC boxing type mentality. But Taylor is certainly not one of those. He is a guy who is very, very aggressively minded. He's a southpaw, and for me, he is most comfortable when he's able to step inside the pocket and let go of power punches, combinations of shots, and really, really able to get involved in a scrap. Watching this fight last night, I actually thought there were several similarities stylistically between Taylor and Errol Spence. They're both tall guys for their division. They're both rangy southpaws. They both look to jab their way in. And once they get in, they're people who like to rip shots to the body. They're people who, from that southpaw stance, like to change levels, maybe up to the head, drop to the body. They're guys who are most comfortable when they are able to let loose their power shots from range. From close range, should I say. And Taylor is a dangerous fighter. He's clearly heavy-handed, although similar to Errol Spence, I would say that the biggest question mark is he a bit defensively lapsed when he is coming in? Is he prepared to take one, to land one on that transition from the outside to the inside? Is he the most defensively responsible? Or is his mentality just more that he wants to seek and destroy, and as such, he's not necessarily keeping a full defensive awareness in a fight, because I saw him caught a number of times last night. But regardless of that, Taylor looks very, very, very good to me, and he's unorthodox. Being such a tall southpaw who likes to fight on the inside, you're probably unorthodox to begin with, and I appreciate he switch hits. He's not just a pure southpaw, but for me, he's a bit more comfortable out of the southpaw stance than out of an orthodox stance. But the other thing he does, which I think is very awkward, is he's one of these fighters who throws lead hooks to the head when someone's got a high guard up, and what he will try and do is thread the hook around the back of someone's guard, so it's coming around like this, and often you're seeing him catching opponents, top of the head, back of the head, this sort of area. And as he does appear to be naturally heavy-handed, that can be a really, really deadly shot, because as you guys know, if you're getting caught back of the head, top of the head, it can affect your equilibrium, can affect your balance a little bit, and those can be the punches that stop opponents, definitely. But yeah, Taylor looks very, very good at this point in his career. He really does. It's going to be one of those where, as he steps up in level, that sort of indication that he may be a bit defensively frail, we're going to see how much of a threat that is, because at this point of his career, it hasn't really caused him any problems whatsoever. And it may be that as he steps up to fight a more elite level of opposition, that defensive frailty will dissipate, because he will be more responsible and be more aware, that he doesn't want to get clipped coming in. But he's a very exciting fighter, and it's a very exciting division in the light welterweight division, domestically. Hara Davies, for me, is a real exciting prospect. And I know the general consensus is that Taylor would probably get the better of a Hara Davies. Taylor appears to be the more hyped prospect, the more well-regarded prospect out of the two. But I find that a very hard fight to call. I think Taylor's the bigger guy. I think Taylor may potentially be the bigger puncher. But I think Ahara Davis is a very skilled individual in his own right, and I think he could potentially cause some problems for Taylor by adopting a counter-punching mentality. But that would be a fantastic fight if it ever did happen. And it's one of those that I'm not 100% sure we will see it in the next year, like Eddie Hearn was predicting, because that's a future world title fight, in my opinion, and the money will be bigger in future. But if it did happen now, I certainly wouldn't be complaining. The other guy, who's kind of the forgotten guy, if you like, is the British champion Tyrone Nell, and he's a very good fighter in his own right as well. I think he's a guy who maybe labours to win. Sometimes he wins fights less convincingly than his skill set should let him. He perhaps allows opponents to enjoy periods of pressure against him and enjoy periods of closing the distance that I think guys like Ahara Davies and Josh Taylor would potentially take advantage of. He also would perhaps lack the power in his work to keep guys like that off him. But he's an awkward customer, a very tall, slippery, slick guy who uses range and movement very well. So certainly not a guy to be overlooked in the division as well. But it's a fascinating mix-up in the light welterweight division domestically. And, 3 fighters there, all of whom are above British level already for me. And I guess the winner of those 3, whoever comes out as the mix, as the top guy, is someone that you'd probably pick to go on to world title honours, I believe. But yeah, Josh Taylor, certainly, if you haven't seen him out already, you can watch it on the Channel 5 app, almost like a BBC iPlayer setup they've got on Channel 5 if you're a UK viewer, and you can watch the fight last night. Look, the opponent wasn't anything overly special. He'd had, I think, 4 losses and 5 draws, and he was a lot smaller man, and he didn't really seem to carry much power to his work. But nevertheless, an experienced operator. He had 20-something wins, and Josh Taylor, for me, made very, very easy work of it. He caught him with a hook to the head, which is probably his best punch, in the 6th round, and dropped him, and then the corner threw in the towel. And for me, they could have let it go on for another 30 seconds, but realistically, it was the right thing to do, because it wasn't a competitive fight, and their man was getting a bit of a pasting. So yeah, credit to Taylor. He goes marching on, and let's hope we see him in a big fight soon, because he's an exciting guy to watch, and he's running through people at the minute. Nick Webb on the undercard. A few people asked me to speak about Nick Webb, undefeated British heavyweight prospect who has got a decent KO ratio. Nick Webb looked okay in there for me, but I think okay is a fair summary. I thought he looked a bit heavy, a bit plodding, and I think as a result that maybe made him look quite slow. I've actually met Nick Webb. I met him at the Chris Eubank versus Reynold Quinlan fight when I was at that fight, and I must admit I was actually I went to buy a pint, and on the way back from buying a pint, my gluttony got the better of me, and I stopped off to buy a pie to have with my pint, and I actually met Nick Webb in the queue to buy a pie. Now, I don't know what he was doing in that queue. Perhaps he was picking up a pie for one of his friends. I don't know. But I was surprised because, it's not something that you typically associate with elite level athletes, even if they're in the heavyweight division. But, maybe I'm being a bit critical. It was a Saturday night out, and I guess he's more than accustomed to treat himself. But anyway, regardless, I've digressed massively. But I did think he was a bit heavy in there. He looked a bit cumbersome for me. I also think he's got a bit of a tendency to reach with his shots. He kind of flails that jab out and doesn't commit to it, and often even against a substantially smaller opponent than him, that jab was coming up short, and I thought it was quite a bizarre fight actually, because he was 3 or 4 inches taller than his opponent, and his opponent had just come to survive, by the way. His opponent didn't have ambition, but he was kind of, I thought he was misjudging the range, and it's very rare you see that when a guy who's a substantially taller, bigger man is misjudging the range against an opponent who isn't, the most slippery, I guess you could say. But I think what Nick Webb could potentially do, especially if he's fighting smaller heavyweights, is commit to that jab. So, throw a jab and then step in behind it. Double it up. If you take a step forward when you throw the jab, and then instantly follow it up with a second one, you're going to be catching these opponents. And you know, I felt a lot of his power punches you could really see coming. They were slow, they were relatively telegraphed, they were easy enough to anticipate. There was one that stuck in my mind. It was an uppercut he threw, and he kind of threw it like that, and he swung and missed like he was a baseball player, you know. And I just kind of feel if he'd committed to that jab, if he'd stepped in on the jab and then stepped in again with a double jab and then thrown a power punch off, he'd have maybe measured the opponent a bit more. There wouldn't be problems judging the range. There wouldn't be inaccuracy creeping in. And if you are a tall guy, if you are a heavy guy, if you're a big guy, and you're swinging and missing like that, it is going to lead to you maybe losing energy. So I thought Nick Webb did okay. I don't want to be too critical on him. There were lots of positives to take from the fight. At present, I see him behind the sort of Dave Allen, Ian Lewison, Sam Sexton mix. He's more, I have him in the sort of Dominic Akinlade, Josh Sandland, Tom Dallas type of mix, Tom Little, you know, those sort of guys, maybe Southern area to British title. But I'm sure Nick Webb can improve, and I'm sure he can, you know, step it up to a higher level against better opposition. I would say in terms of the heavyweight scene in Great Britain at present, it is wide open because, you know, you've got the top guys, you've got, you know, your celebrity boxers, if you like, your Tyson Furys, your David Hayes, your Anthony Joshuas. You'd probably throw in your Dillian Whites and your Derek Chisoras and your David Prices. You've got those guys who are, you know, recognised big names. These are guys who are going to be involved in big fights if they, you know, choose to. And then below that, at British English level, you've got a real mix of fighters. You've got your Dave Allens, Lewisons, Sextons, Cornishes, and, you know, some guys like Nick Webb, etc. And you just kind of think there is a potential route for one of those guys to establish dominance over that division and maybe pick up an English title, pick up a British title. For me, if I had to put my money on one of them, I'd be picking Nathan Gorman, who's fighting Dominic Akinlade for the English at Crystal Palace in April. You know, I really rate Nathan Gorman. I think he's very young. I think he's 19, 20, and he's already looking pretty handy for me. So I expect him to be the one who comes out of it. But you never know, maybe there's room for a guy like Nick Webb to pick up a few more wins and make some waves. But upon last night's performance, I thought he looked okay, but he was probably a guy I thought was more Southern area level as opposed to British champion. But let me know your thoughts. Perhaps I'm being harsh, perhaps I didn't look closely enough. Leave your comments in the section below. What do you make of Josh Taylor? What do you make of Nick Webb? What do you think is the upside for both guys? You know, let's discuss in the comment section below. Do you think my Josh Taylor Errol Spence comparison is fair? Keen to get your take on that as well, guys. Do leave your comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, do take the time to hit the thumbs up button, which adds visibility to this and helps me get new viewers to the channel. And if you would like to check out my other stuff and you haven't done so before, please press subscribe. As always, appreciate you guys tuning in, and thanks for watching.